G'day Internet, and welcome to my first editing session that I'm sharing on my channel. Going forward, any photos that I capture, I'm actually going to record the editing sessions of those as well, just to share with you. You might learn something, you might just be interested. I figure it was a good way to record and show how I end up with the final product. So this is a raw image from a storm chase I had yesterday. Unfortunately, no great storm photos, but I think I got a couple of nice atmospheric, moody, rural type shots that I'm going to work on out of this collection. Now, starting off with these silos and shed, great big storm system behind it, but that was about 100 k's away, something that we couldn't get to. I think for this one now, and I should just reiterate, I'm editing in DxO PhotoLab's 9, and I also use Affinity Photo and Nik Collection. I don't use any Adobe products anymore. I got sick and tired of paying $300-400 a year for 2 programs. I think that's just ridiculous. For half the money, I can own the software. And Affinity is now free if you get the latest version, so that's wonderful. Anyway, let's start with this one. For this, I definitely want to do a crop, and I think I'm going to go in a panorama type format. Now I want to kind of come in a fair way on this. I shoot with a Sony A7R Mark IV, so I've got 61 megapixels to play with. You can see even doing this amount of crop, I've got a huge amount of pixels I can work. Just going to eliminate that foreground, and I think something like that. Take a bit. Something like that's good. With a panorama, I look at every section and just see if there's a bit of interest in each one. I like that. We'll just hit enter and accept that. Now I'm just going to reset my workspace here. I'm going to basically work top down. For my color rendering, I've got a built-in profile I captured previously, which I'm just going to use, but the generic rendering works very, very well. I'm going to take a white balance measurement off the side of the silo here. It's kind of a neutral grey. That gets the warmth back into the colors here because it was quite bright sunlight. Now let's have a look. So looking at my histogram, exposure's not bad, but I'm finding the sky is quite bright. I want to bring a bit of detail back in, and I've got a lot of shadow in here. So I'm not going to play with any of the overall settings. I think they're quite good. What I'm going to do is move down to the denoising and enable Deep Prime 3. That is a fantastic denoise function. If you hit S in DxO here, so you can see this is super clean. There is no noise when I enable this function. The rest of it's good. So now to do some local adjustments, and I'm going to select the AI selection tool and select sky. Perfect. Now this is where I'm going to maybe bring the exposure down a touch, bring those highlights down a touch. But I'm going to push some contrast back into it. Just got to really watch I don't blow out any of these highlights. Let's try a little bit of the clear view. That really will bring some detail out in that cloud. I also want to warm it up a touch. Get some of that sun color back into it. Right, it's nothing dramatic, nothing crazy. Next, I'm going to create another adjustment mask, but this time I'm going to use the auto brush, and I'm going to select the sheds and the silos through like this. Areas that I may have missed. All right, that's good. Now I definitely want to lift the shadows on those. So I've still got some nice shadow detail as far as that kind of 3D looks. The highlights there, dark there, but I've just brought some detail back into it. I think that is about it for my overall adjustments. Next, I need to turn the brush selection off. I've got a bit of the power line up here in the corner, so I will just select the retouch tool, and that just takes it out. All right, from here, I think that's a really good what I'm going to call base. I will just check my histogram. Yeah, I've gone nowhere near to blowing out highlights. If anything, I can probably take the overall exposure up a bit, keep those highlights a little bit in check on the overall. Next, I will take this into Affinity Photo. So just export to application. I'm using Affinity Photo 2 here because at the moment the Nik filters aren't working with the new Affinity 3. I believe that's going to be fixed shortly. As soon as that is, then I'll just do all my workflow in Affinity Photo 3. But I have Affinity Photo 2 and everything's working fine in that. So this should just take a sec to open up. And we'll continue. Okay, so here we have the photo open in Affinity Photo 2. And straight away, I'm going to take this into Nik Color Efex. This is probably my favorite thing for post-processing or doing what I call the finishing touches on photos. I could go nuts with the contrast in that cloud, but I kind of like not having too much detail there. So I'm going to start with Pro Contrast. First thing I always do is do a bit of the color correction. That's actually giving a bit of nice warmth to it. So I'm going to do a bit of that, and then the dynamic contrast, which will just bring a bit of punch into the image. It's really done some beautiful blues there and some nice foreground work here. So this is the before and the after with just that simple filter. It's such a good way of bringing some detail back in. Highlights are still under control. I could restrain them a little bit with this slider here, but I don't need to right now. Next, I think I'm going to do my vignette, which I do on every one of my photos, but this does it so subtly that it works so well. I'm going to leave the center not brightened and just work on the border. Find that that is just giving a nice little bit of extra focus in, and then I will bring the center up just a touch. Again, watching those highlights. These two filters have really given it some punch. The last thing I think I'm going to do here is the saturation. The Brilliance Warmth filter in Nik Color Efex is by far, I find, the best way to add some saturation in that doesn't look nuts. Really, really clever how this works. So if I just bring this up, you can see it's just bringing those oranges up just a bit, but it's keeping those blues really nice and punchy without being too silly. So I've got a really nice contrast in the colors now. I could even warm it just a touch, just swinging each way to see which way it looks. Kind of like that. So the warmth here is reflected in the cloud, but then the blue in the silos is reflected in the sky. So I've kind of got warm blue. That's a really good balance of everything, and I like how that's come out. I'm just going to check, do I need to any more crazy with that vignette? No, that's really nice and subtle. All right, I'm going to apply that. This will just take it back into Affinity Photo. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is hit Control J and just duplicate this layer. And then I'm going to blur it. So I'm going to do a Gaussian blur and just pick a good radius where I'm losing most of the detail, but I can see the large variances. I'm going to hit apply, that blurs that layer. I'm going to drop the opacity to 12%. That's my starting point. I'm then going to add a brightness and contrast adjustment and drag it onto the blur layer. That now means that this adjustment is only affecting that blur layer. I will increase the contrast, increase the brightness a touch, and then so what this has done is added a real nice autumn effect to my photo. I might drop it back to 10%. I think the 12 was a bit too strong, but yep, that's my real simple way of adding an autumn effect, which just adds a bit of softness and a bit of glow to the photo. I really like what it does and how it sort of finishes. Then I'm going to hit Control, Alt, Shift, and E. That duplicates everything into a new pixel layer, and I'm going to merge everything together. So now I've got my next canvas to work with. Finally, I'm going to do some sharpening. Again, Control J to duplicate. For sharpening, I use Topaz Labs Sharpen AI. You can use the Photo AI. I purchased Sharpen AI years ago, and I still find it does everything brilliantly. Just going to let this run and update. And what I will do is change the selection to Skyline Landscape. And what that's going to do is sharpen everything but the clouds, which is, I actually think, might want the clouds for this. So I'm just going to turn that off again, pulling some really nice detail into that cloud actually. So I think for this photo, I'm actually going to sharpen everything. Just going to hit apply. This will pull me back into Affinity. This takes a minute to run, so we'll just wait till we drop back into Affinity. All right, back in Affinity, and if we zoom in, this is looking really nice and sharp. I love how that's come out. So what I'll do, again, is just select both layers, merge selected, and then I will save this, and this will take it back into DxO. So now we've got the final photo here. I'll give it a 5-star rating, which is Control 5 here. Select it with the original and stack them as a photo. So we're done on that one. We'll have a look at the next image now. And I think for this one, going to work on this. So this was, I was hoping for a lightning shot here, and unfortunately nothing was visible. It was all very much embedded up or dropping far off to the stream. This was taken at quite a wide angle, so you can see there's some pretty extreme lens distortion on the side there. I will be cropping in. I want to try and keep those silos fairly central. So I'm going to start with the crop just so I can sort of get my composition how I think. I'll just do it pretty tight. Yeah, I think that's overall. It's a little bit unbalanced to the side, but I've got some nice detail up in there. Let's do a white balance check on this. The side of the silo here. Roof, that's too blue. So there are accurate places to check white balance, but I just like to click around and find something that I think is good. You can also check the as shot, because the camera usually does a pretty good view of it. For this case, yeah, I'm going to stay with that. I've got a lot of room to expand the shadows and the highlights. Okay, so what I think I'm going to start with is I really want to get that moody sky show. I'm going to just pull down the overall exposure of this image. Somewhere about there, I think that looks quite good. If I lift the shadows, lose that up, do a bit of global contrast. It's going to bring some of that detail. The sky, I think I'm going to save that for a local adjustment. What I might do is work ground up in this case. Okay, so I think for a local adjustment, what I'm going to do is create a new mask. I'm selected the hue mask. Going to select the sky here and then invert it, and that will select most of the foreground for me, and then I can start tweaking it. Exposure a touch. Now the reason I did it that way was I'm not getting any edges or weird misselected sections along the horizon there. It did a very good job of selecting just the ground. Sometimes I like to just bring the highlights up, the shadows down, but there's not enough contrast there to do it. I'm going to try the contrast slider with a bit of Clear View Plus, and that will bring in a bit of nice clarity. Finally, I think for the foreground, I want to warm it a touch. That's looking pretty good. I think that's what I call my base setup. I've got all the levels, brightnesses, everything where I want them. If I go back and check the histogram, nothing's blown out. Everything's quite underexposed at the moment. We're going to take this again into Affinity for some finishing. Okay, we're here in Affinity. I'm going to duplicate the layer, which I should have done in the first photo. Go to my plugins, Color Efex. I think for this one I'm going to have a look at the tonal contrast filter, because that's really good for bringing detail. You can just see with one click it's done a lot to the sky, but it definitely overcooked it on the foreground. So I'm just going to reset these to 0. Start with each filter one by one and see if there's any changes. There's nothing on that. Midtones will definitely do some changes to the sky, like about there. And shadows will just bring a little bit more darker sections into that sky. You've got a few different ways it's going to create that. I'm going to leave it at standard because I quite like what it's done there. However, I don't want to do it to all of the photo, so I'm going to add a control point, basically saying this is just really rough, but there's an easy way you can do it here. It's only going to affect everything above that control line. And if I turn that on and off. It's nice. I like that. Next, I'm going to do overall pro contrast. Again, I'll have a look at the color correction, see what that does to the colors. It's taking a bit of blue out of the sky, it's making it a little bit more realistic and a bit of orange. So I'm going to meet it about a third of the way in, and then dynamic contrast will just bring that punch right back into the image, foreground and sky. I like the overall result there. I'm going to do a darken, lighten, and even though there's nothing here, I quite like the brightening there because it's drawing your eye in and it's touching in on the silo, and then with the outside vignette it's definitely pulling your eyes in just the level. So you can see before the vignette, after the vignette, and it's a really natural way to darken down the borders and just bring a bit of emphasis back into the main part of the image where you're looking. Finally, some brilliance and warmth. Start with a bit of saturation, bring that up to around there. That's some really nice color. Do I want any warmth to it? Pull it off. I actually like a bit of both ways. So again, what I think I'm going to do here is, no, I think I'll just keep it like that. I don't think I'm going to play with the warmth on this one. And we will apply that and take it back into Affinity. Now you can do these from DxO PhotoLabs. I prefer to do it in Affinity because I can work on layers, I can mask in sections in and out. It's just a nicer experience, I think. All right, and now I'm going to do my autumn effect as normal. So I'm going to duplicate the layer, go to filters, blur, gauge and blur, blur out most of the fine detail, leaving just large detail, and apply that. Drop the opacity back to 12% for starters. Add a brightness and contrast layer adjustment, drag it onto the blur, and then bring up the contrast, which will darken it a little bit, but it does add that glow in. And then you bring up the brightness to bring that kind of level back. If I look before and after, the overall brightness hasn't changed too much, but it's added a definite little glow to it. It's just like a little nice little softening. And I like that effect. It's just something I do. You'll see a lot of my photos with it. And yeah, I like it. All right, then Control-Alt-Shift-E to duplicate everything to a new pixel layer. Select it all and merge it. I just do this because it's just easier on the computer memory while I'm editing. Sharpening time, so we're going to duplicate the layer, go into Topaz Lab Sharpen AI. I just prefer it over Photo AI. It's the older version. I don't believe you can even buy it anymore. But if you want this type of feature, you can definitely get it from Photo AI. I definitely want to just select the skyline and landscapes. There's no detail in that cloud, and we will let this run. So on the right will be the sharpened result, beautifully sharpened. I don't need to tweak any of these settings. That just looks fantastic. And on the left is the unsharpened. It just makes it perfect. It just makes it perfectly sharpened. There's no artifacts. Nothing. All right, we'll take that back into Affinity and we'll merge the layers together and save that back to PhotoLab. Hop out of there. All right, and we'll save that back to PhotoLab. Hop out of there. Here's our finished product. Looking very nice. Lovely detail in that sky. We'll hit Control 5 and mark that as a good photo. Select the original RAW and stack those together. Okay, for the third and last photo I'm going to edit for this session, I'm going to work on this one here. It's got a very significant call that we were looking at it from behind, and the white in there's a lot of actual hail in that, and I really want to try and bring some of that detail out. Now this is shot exposed perfectly, nothing blown out, but I really want to try and get that detail. So I always start by just having a look at what exposure does to it. Yeah, I think most of the work for this is going to have to be done in Nik Collection, but we will start. I will definitely do my normal denoise, which is just the prime 3 in DxO. Probably going to crop in a little. I mean, the outer edges look nice, but I really think I just want to focus on that core. Around about that should be a nice crop, looking level. I'll try a local adjustment. However, I think it's not going to do a huge amount here because the tools are a little bit limited. We bring the exposure down a touch and the contrast in, bring a bit of pop to it, and then if I duplicate this mask and invert it, call it ground, just so I don't forget what I'm doing, and then bring the exposure of the ground up a touch, warm it up a touch, a little bit of contrast to it, clear view do, it's not too bad. I do just want to have a look at what clear view does on this sky. This is where you can really pull some detail out. I mean, you go nuts. That's way too overdone, but it just shows you what's there you can potentially bring out. But I want to do that in Nik Collection. All right, I'm going to call this my starting point. Let's go into Affinity and keep working on it from there. All right, here we are in Affinity. I'm going to duplicate the layer with Control J and go straight into Nik Collection Color Efex. Definitely want to try tonal contrast on this one. Start with the highlights is just going to basically make that right side pop, which I don't really want to do. I don't want the eye drawn here. I want the eye drawn here. So I'll just zero out that one. Mid-tones will definitely bring out a little bit of detail. Think about there's good, starting to get some of the info there, and then shadows just make this contrast a little bit better. Don't want to add in the saturation here. I'm just going to check. Fine is bringing out really nice differences here, but I want to keep this fairly smooth. I kind of like how it looks, and I haven't touched the highlights, so that's good. Let's load up Pro Contrast and do a color correction, basically neutralizing that sky. Kind of, I think, what I want to do for this. And then let's see what dynamic does. That's really going to emphasize that rain just coming down from that core. That's lovely. I will fix up this bright area with a vignette. So let's load in a darken lighten, changing it more to the white. I just prefer this type of shape for this type of filter. Center is good, but I really want to darken down borders. I really want this quite dark and a bit punchy. Pretty nice, but I feel like I'm losing the shadow that has gone too dark on the horizon there. So I actually go back up to one of my previous filters, just lift those shadows back up. See before and after. Check the saturation on the image now. Some saturation in, it's going to get that foreground nice. Sky is still quite monotone, which I don't mind. Put a little bit of warmth. I think that looks awesome. I really like that. Let's take that back into Affinity. Could have done a polarization filter as well, but I feel like that sky is actually gone. Really kind of polarized effect as it is. And I want to probably do my blur effect now. So let's duplicate the layer, do a Gaussian blur on it somewhere around there. Add in a brightness and contrast adjustment. Drag it onto the blur layer. Change the opacity to 12% to start with, and then do my brightness contrast adjustments. So contrast will really bring out the glow. Brightness will bring back a bit of that level. I've brightened it up a little bit that way as well, and I think that looks nice. It's kind of softened the clouds up, kept really nice foreground detail here. And then finally we will Control-Alt-Shift-E to do a new pixel layer, merge everything together, duplicate that, and sharpen using Topaz Labs, Sharpen AI. And not sure if I want to sharpen the clouds. We'll have a look at what the default looks like. Drag the preview over here a bit, let this load up. So you can see down here it's just running through, sharpening the whole image, and it's actually really nicely defined those clouds. So I think I'm going to sharpen overall. I'll just check what it's doing to the foreground, and that's really brought the definition back in there. So happy with that. I'm going to hit OK. We'll go back to Affinity. Okay, so I don't need to do any masking or anything out of the sharpening, so I'm just going to merge the two layers and then save this back out, and we'll go back to DxO. All right, back in DxO once again. That's my final. I'm going to hit Control 5 and rate that. Select the original raw and stack those together. Just keeps everything a lot neater. That's it for this little editing session. I've got a couple more photos there I'll work on, and I'll show them up at the end of this video. Be sure to check in the description below as well to see the video of me actually out there taking these images. It was a very frustrating day. I didn't get the photos that I envisaged. I really wanted some lightning and some storm photos and things like that, but I'm very happy with the kind of landscapey, atmospheric type shots I did get. So you win some, you lose some, make hay while the sun shines, so to speak. Please, if you like this video and you like this format, I'd love to hear in the comments below. Subscribe to my channel, give it a big thumbs up. I'll be showing all of my editing sessions moving forward. So my channel will have a couple of different sections for you. It will have editing, it will have storm chasers, it will have my landscape sections, and it will have my astro and nightscape photography as well, once we sort of get back into that season and some clear skies. And until next time, I appreciate you all. Stay safe.